Hi, I'm Clever Ghoul, but you can call me Nikki. Welcome back to the channel! Recently, a friend and I were looking up random things online, and she told me she looked for broccoli earrings and sent me a picture. And when I saw them, I knew I could make some. And she happened to mention that she wasn't going to get them, and it's her birthday, so I knew I had to make them for her. I've made shrink plastic earrings on the channel before, but I have never made them with frosted plastic or colored pencils, which is what I decided to test out with this project, and I have to say, I think it's my new favorite way to do this. So with that being said, let's get into it. For materials, you'll need the following: frosted shrink plastic, colored pencils, scissors, a hole punch, a heat gun, or you can use your oven, Mod Podge Dimensional Magic, pliers, jump rings, and earring hooks. I added on some beads to add in some texture, so I also ended up using B7000 and seed beads. All of the materials will be linked in the description box. These are affiliate links, so if you use them, I earn a small commission, so thank you. Before actually starting, I pulled out a piece of this frosted shrink plastic and then took out a bunch of the colored pencils I thought I might want to use. For me, when I've used Sharpie for this in the past, the color changes wildly once it's heated up and shrunk. So I wrote down all the different color names I wanted to use, and then I shrunk that down, and they stayed pretty much the same as they were before, but it was good to know. So I recommend testing that out before you begin. Also, I drew out my design on my iPad. You can draw yours ahead of time. You can draw yours directly on the plastic with no plan. You can find an image online and print that out and trace over that, but just remember to make your design about 3 times bigger than the size you want it once it's shrunk down. I put down a piece of frosted plastic, textured side facing me, onto my iPad and traced the outline of the broccoli. I then added in some of the color, focusing on the highlights first. It's better to add the brighter colors first so they stay vibrant. They tend to look dull if you do them last. Then I put the sheet plastic down on the table and kept the reference in front of me while I added in more colors, again going from lightest to darkest. For the floret, I drew a bunch of dots in various shades to mimic the buds that broccoli has. Then I went in and started to add some shading with a darker green. And then I went back and added in any extra buds or details I thought it needed. For the second earring, I repeated the process, but I traced over the first earring instead of the iPad this time. Once I was satisfied, I cut out the broccoli, making sure to round any edges with my scissors so that the earring wouldn't have any sharp edges. I marked where I wanted the hole for the jump ring to go. Make sure you're not too close to the edge because sometimes the plastic will rip. I marked it on the first earring and then put the second earring on top of that one and marked the same spot. Then I punched. To shrink the earrings, you can use your oven or do what I did and use a heat gun. Be extremely careful if you're using a heat gun. The heat gun can go up to 800 degrees and it needs to be used over a heat-safe surface and should be handled very carefully. I like to have a little metal stick around to help hold the plastic down so it doesn't fly away when I'm using the heat gun. The Shrinky Dink will get really shriveled up, but trust the process, it will flatten back out. However, I do like to roll them on both sides and apply flat, even pressure to make sure they stay flat as they cool. This is optional, but I thought it would be fun to add a textural element, so I went through my seed beads and pulled out some B7000 and started to add them on, matching the bead color to the color of the area I was placing it. I let those sit for an hour to dry, and then I sealed the earring with Dimensional Magic. I love to use this as a sealer for jewelry. It makes everything look resin-like while locking in your drawing and keeping it safe. Follow the directions on the bottle, and if you get any bubbles, prick them with a pin. Also, be sure to have toothpicks on hand to keep the glue from going into the earring hole. Make sure to wipe the back so that there's no Dimensional Magic there, and keep these on a flat surface as they dry so that they dry evenly and don't stick to the surface they're on. They take about 3 hours to dry, but I let them fully set overnight before adding on the jump rings. Hold the jump ring on one side with one plier, and then with the other plier in your other hand, open up the other side of the ring. Loop the ring through the earring hole, hold one side with the plier, and then close the other side with another plier. Repeat on the other earring. To add on the earring hook, repeat the same opening process, loop the ring onto the earring hook, then loop the earring jump ring on, then close. And then you have an earring. which means it's time for the reveal. Here they are. I really loved how these turned out, and I can't wait to give them to my friend. I think the frosted plastic is now my preferred method of doing this, as well as the colored pencil. I really loved it. That being said, if you did want something fully transparent or to look like stained glass, I do think that going with Sharpie is the better method for that. But overall, I was really impressed with how this turned out. I also really love how much the beads add to it. I think they looked fine on their own without them, but the beads just add an extra punch and make them so much more fun to look at visually, as well as texturally. The back of the Shrinky Dink is glossy, so I didn't have to do a layer of the dimensional magic there. It's just how it was naturally, and I really love how the design comes through still. More importantly, these were so much fun to make. I had a total blast. And even though I made these look like broccoli, you could do any design you want with this project. Speaking of, what kind of design would you make at home? I would love to hear about it, so let me know in the comments. Like I said, these are for a friend of mine, so if you're watching, happy birthday! Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!